Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to MotorWeek podcast number 244. I'm delighted to have you with us. And with us on our screen go-around today is writer, two-wheel reporter, Brian Robinson. Hi, Brian.
Hello, John.
Our over-the-edge reporter, Greg Carlos.
Hello, hello.
And I love the fact you're in the season, Greg. That looks great. And
right.
You are too, Kyle, down below, our road test producer. Welcome, Kyle Scanlon.
Thank you, thank you.
I'm the one that looks like, I guess, Brian, you and I are kind of the odd people out, but we are in the season. All our decorations are downstairs, but you two with the wreath in the background, Kyle, and the tree, Greg, happy holidays, and happy holidays, everybody. Okay, we've got a lot to cover on our podcast. We've got three vehicles that we're going to talk about. We've got a lightning round. We've got a viewer question from Robert. See if anybody's got any rant and raves. Hopefully not too many rants this holiday season. But let's start off with the 2021 Ford Bronco Sport. This is the smaller escape-based SUV under the Bronco name, their new sub-brand. And Greg, you've had a chance to actually drive it. So why don't you fill us in on what you think?
Yep, they flew me up to Detroit during the early November, and which was weird for me a little bit because it's my first time traveling since the pandemic started. But, you know, kudos to Ford for really making everything very, very safe and seamless. And to get to the car, or the, in this case, the crossover, another crossover, but this is a good one. I really enjoyed driving it, the Bronco Sport. Just to clear everything up, I think some people still kind of get confused that this is not the two-door or the four-door, like rough and tough Wrangler fighter.
It's not the truck-based, Ranger-based model. This is
correct.
Escape front-wheel drive based.
Yep, front-wheel drive based, but all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive is standard across the board. Two engine choices. One is the 1.5-liter three-cylinder. That's 181 horsepower. The upgrade when you get to the higher trims is a 2-liter four-cylinder EcoBoost, 250 horsepower, which they say is best in class. I think more importantly, it's the 277 pound-feet of torque, which you really feel. I mean, it gets up and goes from a stop. It sounds pretty good too, but it's like pumped in noise, so I don't know how a lot of people feel about that. I think it's still cool to have that like nice sounding growl, but when you know that it's artificial, I think it kind of kills some of it. But I mean, it still sounds good when you step on the gas pedal. And I think that's what most people are after. Really comfortable on the road, which is kind of what the truck is supposed to be, or the crossover is supposed to be, because it is based on that Escape. It's actually 8 inches shorter, so it's smaller than I think a lot of people think it is. It fights the Jeep Compass, so it's really not a lot of room in the second row, not much at all. But the cargo area has plenty of room. It also has a lifting rear glass on the tailgate, which I'm not sure why not a lot of car companies do that anymore. I don't know if anybody else knows that answer, but it's nice to see here.
I think, and a lot of people didn't even know it was there. I love it, but it's almost I'm not sure. I can't really think of too many other SUVs that have got a separate opening rear glass. I know there's a few, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, really useful. But I think what most people are interested in is the off-road capabilities, and it's it's pretty darn good off-road. I mean, it has, they call them GOAT modes, GOAT, for go over any type of terrain. And we were at a really cool off-road park called Hollyoaks Off-Road Vehicle Park. And they put us through some pretty hard off-roading for, really an escape-based platform. You can get up to almost 9 inches of ground clearance in the top end, like Badlands trim, which with that, you get that 2-liter engine. It's attached to an 8-speed automatic transmission, which both engines are. But the upgraded engine gets an upgraded transmission, which has an oil cooler. It also has paddle shifters. It's also attached to a more advanced all-wheel drive system, which really is if you're planning on doing any kind of serious off-roading in this vehicle, you probably want to jump up to that newer or the more advanced all-wheel drive system. Has mud, snow, sand modes. It has a twin clutch rear drive unit, which has a locking feature. It's not necessarily a limited slip. It's just it distributes the torque extremely quickly and to individual wheels, which is important when you're climbing steep hills or in deep sand. So I was comparing it to a Compass. Oh God, I'm just blanking on the name of their off-road package. Why am I missing it?
The most trail-worthy Compass.
Yeah. Trailhawk.
Trailhawk. That's what I'm thinking of. Sorry. It'll go anywhere that Jeep will go.
Brian?
I think I don't know. I have mixed feelings on it. Obviously, I'm a journal like Greg does, very comprehensive review there. I think it's cool that they made it so legit off-road. I mean, I think they almost had to do that, bringing the Bronco name back and bringing this one back first instead of the quote-unquote real Bronco. But I mean, that obviously was a lot of money spent in development that I'm not sure how many Bronco Sport owners are going to take advantage of that. I'm not sure that was maybe the greatest decision money-wise as far as development, but I think it's pretty cool and definitely looks cool. Look forward to driving it.
Kyle, any impressions?
I mean, everything was basically covered there. I don't have a lot more to add. I can definitely, I agree with Brian where, they definitely threw a bunch of money into it, and you got to wonder how many people are actually going to buy that as opposed to going for, the Bronco that everyone knows much more about. But, it's a cool little thing. And, I do enjoy off-roading, when I get the chance to do it, and being in a smaller package like that, I'm really looking forward to driving it as well, and hopefully being able to do some off-roading with it to see what it's capable of.
To me, what is exciting about it is it seems to be a return to the kind of rough and ready wagon type features that the original Jeep XJ back in the early 80s had, the Cherokee and the Wagoneer. I mean, I owned a couple of those plus the pickup. And I really thought that the size and the packaging were excellent. Although from looking at the stats, this Bronco Sport is actually a little bigger. But that squareness, and if you really want to carry a lot of stuff, square is where it's at in a relatively small footprint. So I'm looking forward to driving it. I think it's an old idea that they brought back and done right. Yeah, you could still get a lot of square SUVs like the Compass, but they just seem to lack something in execution. They weren't as serious about being all capable, and the Sport does. And as you've said, and we've all said a couple of times, the regular Bronco, the truck-based Bronco, when it finally shows up, is going to be what everybody's going to be keying on. And I know there are aftermarket people that are opening up whole new arms of their business just to service it. But it's the Bronco Sport that's probably going to be the volume vehicle. It's going to be less expensive. It's going to be more manageable. It's going to be probably a better ride, we expect. That was a great report. Anybody got anything else on it before we move on?
I would just piggyback on the opening rear glass. I love that they did that. Most people, like you said, don't even know if their vehicle does or not, but it comes in handy, especially if you got like a bike rack on the back. And you need to get into the back with, allows that.
So you don't have to take it off.
Correct. So stuff like that really comes in handy.
Yeah, I love the rear opening glass as well. For a while, I guess 4Runner, I guess over at Toyota still has a power one that goes down, or at least they sliding. But there's not very many of those around, and gee, they're so useful. If you've got something small, you don't have to, deal with that big hat. So kudos for Ford for doing that, because that's an expense. That was not a cheap decision either. Okay, we're going to move on to another Ford vehicle, another one where we've had limited driving, although in this case I've driven it more than I think Brian and I both have driven it more than perhaps Greg and Kyle, and that's the Ford Mustang Mach-E, the all-electric SUV, midsize from Ford, piggybacking on the Mustang heritage. To many people, that was a heresy. I'll start. I had a chance to drive it, and I had ridden in it a couple of times, And riding in it was like, okay, it's fast, it's quiet, it's all right. But when you get behind the wheel and you start to take in everything that's there as far as the way the controls work, the fact that they've taken their tablet and really, I think, outdone anybody else, including Tesla, as far as making it easy to use without taking too much attention away from the road, and combine that with a competitive price with folks like Tesla and a mileage, a range that, although it's not as good as the Tesla Y, it comes close, up to 300 miles with the extended battery. Then you add in the prowess of it. It handles amazingly well. Of course, it's fast. That's no big secret. I was pretty much, simply put, blown away by it. And I really do think that the combination of a well thought out electric vehicle with the Mustang heritage, no matter how many people get upset about that, Porsche did it, other people have done it, I think they've got a real winner on their hands. And so my early take on it was very strong. Brian, you drove it after I did.
Yeah, I got a quick jaunt behind the wheel. Maybe not overall impressed with it as you were. I did like it. It does drive amazingly well. I didn't play with the screen at all. I just focused on driving.
Yeah.
It does handle very well. Never at any time did it feel like a Mustang.
No, that's true.
But it's fast, it's fun, it's an EV. It's a car they had to do, whether some of us like the naming of it or not. And Greg was talking about the fake engine noise in the Bronco Sport. There was definitely some kind of simulated noise there. And it was, I would say it was better than most. It actually kind of sounded like you were driving a real car. I'm not sure if you can.
A real car.
I'm not sure if you can adjust that or make it differently. I didn't have time to play with it, but it sounded better than some of the fake noises that I've heard in other EVs.
So you have 3 driving modes, at least in the premium. You have the Whisper, and they're oddly named.
Right,
I can't say I love them. It's the same thing with the whole Mustang thing. It's like just whatever. Whisper, Engage, which is that middle mode, and then Unbridled is that top end, like sport. That's where you
think the horse reference there is too obvious.
Yeah, so they pump in the most noise up there in Unbridled. But if you're in Whisper, it's darn quiet, and that's what I like driving in the most, because it's quiet.
Yeah.
But to Brian's point, the pumped in sound actually does respond well to throttle input. So like you're getting that, audible sense from stepping into the throttle. Also really impressed with it, John. I drove it also up in Michigan again.
Right.
And
you actually spend more time in it than either Brian or I did. So
right. I got a lot of time to really just kind of sit in it. So I went into the back seat, because the sloping profile line makes it seem like there's not much room in there, but there actually is. I could sit behind where I would normally sit in the driver's seat fine. And I told you, John, that I think I could probably handle a few hours back there, as long as the range holds out.
And people should know you're what, 6'3", 6'4"?
6'3", yeah.
Yeah.
So really impressed from that. And the whole Mustang argument, I get it. It's going to die out, though. I think eventually the vehicle is going to speak for itself, and a few years down the road, I don't think anybody's going to think much of the Mustang name being thrown on it. It's just because it's so fresh right now. Right. But it honestly just gets in the way of what I think is a really, really nice all-electric SUV.
I agree. Kyle, I know you haven't had much experience with it, but you have seen it. The idea of, you're a Ford guy. You got a Ford pickup truck. Yeah. You got an F-150, and there's an F-150 EV coming. How do you feel about taking these legendary names and mixing them in with so much new technology?
I mean, at first when you hear, Mustang Mach-E, and obviously what a new Mustang looks like, and then you see what that looks like, it kind of, for me, it rubbed me the wrong way a little bit initially. I was kind of one of those people that was like, how dare you put the Mustang name on that? But I feel like, as on a sales perspective, it's in a sales perspective, it's it's a good idea, because it's so recognizable. You say Mustang, anybody who's not even car people are generally going to know what you're talking about. So, I was a little annoyed with it at first, but, it looks great, and hearing such good reviews from you guys who have actually driven it, it gives me hope. And when, you spoke about the F-150 EV real quick, I don't really have a problem with that. I don't know anybody that are my friends that are truck owners that would ever go buy an all electric truck, but, only time will tell. And it's the step that every manufacturer has to make to go in the direction to stay competitive and to try and, make the world healthier.
Yeah. I should point out they've got a more aggressive Mustang Mach-E GT that'll be out in the summer. And it lops about a second off the 0 to 60 times. So instead of 5 seconds, it's under 4. But maybe that'll also handle a little bit more. But I don't see how you can take an electric platform with a big heavy battery and a low center of gravity and really even pretend that it's going to handle like a front engine rear drive big V6 or V8 with all the weight up front. I mean, it's just the physics are just completely different. I guess they can give you the acceleration and the kinship through styling, which I think they've done, and I think they've done it well. But one more point before we leave it on the central tablet. One of the things that I've always kind of found awkward in a Tesla and even in other brands like Volvo is how many times, how limited the information was on there and how many times you had to touch something to get it to do anything. And I found the Ford system had more information available. It's a huge tablet and pretty much one touch, maybe two at the most, you got where you wanted to go. So it was, and it's also pretty high up. It's not at the top, but it seemed to be so you didn't have to look down very much. Although I did catch myself, and this is, I'm sure, what Ford wants and everybody with these tablets want, is you to start using your voice commands more. And it did seem to respond pretty well to that. So I also like the interior. I just thought it was a nice looking, modern, but not over the top interior. It had some style to it. I wouldn't call it minimalist, but it was not overdone, but it wasn't stark. So they did a nice job. Let's move on to really one of the most interesting new compact car lines in this year. We've got a new Hyundai Elantra that's out, and with that Elantra, they've got a semi-performance model. They're in line, and then they're also going to have a regular N model coming down the pike. I had a chance to drive the N line and also their hybrid briefly a few days ago. Has anybody else been in the Elantra?
Yes, actually, they flew me out to California about a month ago for the launch event for both the Sonata N line and the Elantra N line and other Elantras as well. But we're not going to go into those ones today. We're just going to talk about the N lines.
Why don't you start then on the Elantra N line? So give us any background on the overall car.
I mean, they threw in a turbocharged 1.6 liter, which gives you about 201 horsepower. And it's just enough power to make the car fun. One of my favorite features of it is it comes standard with a 6-speed manual transmission. And I got lucky enough to be able to snag one of those after our lunch break and drive it back to the hotel. And that car is an absolute blast. I was going through the canyons up in Malibu and then going down the PCH all the way into Hollywood. And, it's just fun being in a 6-speed again. You almost don't get the opportunity very often anymore. And the fact that they're offering it standard, there is an automatic that, you pay a little extra money for, but the fact that it comes in as standard really gives you that performance feel. And, the words performance and Hyundai are two things you generally don't think go together. And they're definitely working on that. They've re-engineered, the suspension. It has accents on the exterior that you will only find on the N line. They're not on any other versions of the Elantra. A cool little N line badge in the corner of the front grille, which is I just those little details I really enjoy.
The interior is unique too. The instrument panel is actually different. It's a little more sporty in some ways. It's a little more. We use the word minimalist than the other, at least the other Elantra hybrid that I drove. They're saying, I don't know what they. I'll ask you what they said at the event. It seems like the inline it's not the Civic Type R competitor. That'll be the N. This is more like an SI competitor. Yeah.
It's it's not the top performance line. It's kind of the the middle of the road when you don't want to go crazy with it and get every. I'm sorry, my dog is tugging on my leg right now.
Maybe he wants to go out, so be careful.
But yeah, it's like you just said, it's the SI competitor. They're not going after the Type R, and that's what the Sonata or the Elantra N will be, which I got a chance to look at. But they had that crazy digital wrap on it, so you couldn't really get a good idea of the lines on the car or anything like that. Yeah. So they had one at the event that you could look at, but I'd say it's a very capable car, and for the price point, it's offered at $24,000. So for a middle of the road performance car, I'd say it's not too much money. And also, one of the things that I would say is the clutch is fantastic, and I think it would be a perfect car for somebody who wants to learn how to drive a manual transmission to learn in, because it's extremely forgiving. It's just light enough that you're not really it doesn't grab the gear too hard when you're going, unless you're blasting through the gears at full throttle, you get a good little jolt. But other than that, it's very, very well engineered. I thought the gear shift and the clutch were pretty sweet. I was not expecting it to be as good as it is. I should just tell everybody that the Elantra lineup in general is sleeker than it's been before. If you take a look at the Sonata, which is, when it came out almost a year ago, everybody was quite taken with its looks. This is like a baby Sonata in a lot of ways as far as the styling. It's pretty roomy inside. How about you other two guys? Any impressions from what you've either read or seen?
I know the previous Elantra N was, I was so impressed with that car. I love driving that car. And I'm glad that the N line has some performance upgrade. Is that the same with the Sonata as well? The Sonata N line has performance upgrades as well. I saw the press release and it said Hyundai's hot new sedan gets a high performance look. And I stopped reading from there because, I didn't think there would be anything more to learn from there. But I love the whole N philosophy for sure. Yeah.
I think it's fair to say, even we get confused with the naming scheme. It's not just Hyundai, but if you're at home and you're getting yourself confused between N and N line, it's okay. We do too. I think it is a little bit confusing. It's kind of like a little bit akin to Audi's S and S line and RS and all that stuff. So just think if you see a line written behind a letter, it's probably not as good as just the letter on itself.
Right. I think Audi is the one that probably started that. Let's switch gears a little bit to the other models. I've driven the hybrid. I haven't driven the standard car. The hybrid system, Hyundai is really pouring on the coals, adding hybrid models to almost all of their lineups, which is something that Toyota is also doing. So Hyundai seems to be doing it a little quicker and a little more quieter. It was very impressive. The instrument panel has a little bit different look. It's a little less sporty, but also a little bit slightly more high tech. I was kind of it has more redundant. The hybrid had more redundant manual controls to go along with the touchscreen, and actually had a larger touchscreen than the inline. But having said that, it was a very civilized vehicle. It was very difficult to tell when you were in EV or under power, except if you watch the gauges, and very, very little change in sound on the interior. Very comfortable car. It's rated, I think the top model is rated up to 58 miles per gallon. I didn't drive it long enough to get it that high, but I saw well up into the high 40s during my relatively brief drive. It just drove home the case to me one more time why so many manufacturers are dropping their mid-size sedans and sticking with the compacts, which are not small at all anymore. And if I was a buyer coming in and looking at a Sonata or an Elantra, I'd say, the difference in price and how much am I going to use the rear seat and a few other things, that would have to, I'd probably buy the less expensive Elantra. Pretty impressive car.
I'm curious what models like the Elantra hybrid and like Corolla hybrid are going to start doing to the dedicated hybrids, like the Prius and the Ioniq, because I know we really like the Corolla hybrid, and it sounds like the Elantra hybrid's pretty awesome too. So what does that do to like their dedicated hybrid platforms?
I don't know, unless you really want to stand out and everybody look at you and say, oh, they're driving, an electrified vehicle, which some people still do. I think I'm not sure, except for marketing, I'm not sure what the value is.
Right, because they're very similarly sized.
Yeah. Well, I think mileage-wise, I believe the Hyundai Elantra hybrid falls. It's either not quite. I think it's not quite as good as the
Ioniq.
Maybe it's a little better than the Ioniq. I'm not sure. Brian, anything to add?
No, nothing further.
Have you've seen the Elantra in general? What do you think about what you know?
I think, as you said, it looks good. It's similar to the Sonata. It's a great value. Some of the Hyundais, their base price is very low, but when you start adding stuff, the price gets a lot closer to the Hondas and Toyotas of the world. But I think the Elantra still does have a pretty good price advantage in that segment, and I think it's a good overall package.
Yeah, nice car. Okay, thanks, everybody. Let's move on to our lightning round. We were talking about the Bronco Sport. It's on the way to dealerships right now. Production of the 2- and 4-door Bronco, however, has now been delayed due to a supply chain disruption related to COVID-19. Word is that it's the supplier for the roof panels. Ford says production is now slated to start in the spring, with deliveries coming up this summer. Should prospective buyers be prepared for more delays or continue making space in their garages? What do you think?
I don't think you can throw anything out in 2020. But from what I heard, though, it really is. It just come down to that top issue. And from what I read, there's even like the outside chance that they could continue on with production of the actual truck, because they don't need to have the roof to actually finish producing the truck and building it. So they could, in theory, build the Broncos and then get the tops later and have dealers install them if for whatever reason they had to. Yeah. But I still think it's going to get figured out. But, this is just kind of the time we're in. Stuff's just getting delayed, and there's really not anything you can do about it.
Anybody else on this burning topic?
Yeah. I would say there's going to be more delays everywhere. Stuff shutting down again. Definitely expect more delays.
Right, Kyle, anything from you?
I mean, not really. Just, it's 2020 just being 2020. That's what it seems like. And with, things opening up and shutting down and opening up and keep repeating the cycle, it's going to screw up the process of a lot of manufacturers. So I agree with Brian. Just expect more delays.
Yeah, well, this is our time to just tell everybody out there to be careful, because this thing's not over yet. Okay, let's move on to our viewer question from Robert. And this is a good one. Do the brake lights on EVs come on during regenerative braking? How does the driver behind me know I'm slowing while I use one pedal driving with my EV? What do you think?
I was curious about this a few years ago too, I think with the i3. And yes, I can speak for the i3 and many other EVs. If you let off the gas and you have the heavy regen braking on, it actually will trigger the brake lights, because you're braking. And a lot of the times you can come to a complete stop without even touching the brake pedal. And clearly people need to know you're doing that. So yes, with all the EVs that have done that, in my experience, they trigger the brake lights. And obviously if you hit the brakes, you're still regenning the brakes originally before the pads kick in. And obviously the lights come on then too.
Anybody else have anything to add?
I'm not sure that they all do all the time. Is it only in like the hyper regen modes, or even in the basic modes?
I think it's vehicle dependent.
Yeah, I think I've noticed that as well. And it's no different than like if you're downshifting and engine braking, you can slow down a car significantly, without triggering the brakes. So I'm not sure that's consistent across the board. I know that a lot of them do, but I don't know if it depends on mode or not. That is a good question.
Yeah, like I said,
any real world experience there?
Well, yeah, when I did the EV road trip with Dave and the crew, I was driving the Ioniq the whole time, and I tried my best for a lot of the time to use the one pedal driving, and this is going away from the brake lights turning on or off, but it's a weird experience to not use the brakes and just kind of trust that the car is going to come to a stop when you want it to. And I did have the thought when I was driving sometimes, and I was wondering, I'm like, I don't even know if this is triggering my brake lights. I don't know if the people behind me know I'm slowing down. But to Brian's point, if you have a manual transmission and you're downshifting and you're using the engine to slow down, there's no brake lights doing that either. So, I mean, I think it's definitely a good question, and it's something that the manufacturers definitely need to make sure is happening if it isn't with their vehicles.
Greg?
I mean, it's a fair point about the downshifting, but I still don't think it is as aggressive as what these one pedal regen systems are doing. I mean, they bring you down to a stop easily in stop and go traffic. And I think it's fair to say that you should just figure it out on your own, because like I said, in my experience, I have tested a few of them. They have worked as they're supposed to, and I think they should. But as far as I know, I don't think there's any standard that says they have to. So maybe just have somebody follow behind you and give it a test, and then you'll know.
Yeah, I think in general, if you're just slowing down, so you've got light regen, the lights don't come on. But I'm not sure that's true. I actually watched a YouTube video where the guy was following his spouse in a Tesla Model S, and she just let off the throttle and the brake lights came on. So that may have been dependent on how the car was set, because in many cases you can set the car for a lot of regen or light regen. So it looks like if you're doing heavy regen, they come on, but we're not quite sure about light depending on the vehicle.
Well, if it was light regen, that would get pretty annoying to the driver behind on the highway if you just lift off the throttle and the brake lights come on.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, Robert, I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure it does, but maybe you need to get somebody to follow behind you and talk to you on the phone and tell you what's happening. Any rant and raves before we wrap up our holiday edition of the MotorWeek podcast?
I'll do my yearly rave about minivans. We had the Sienna Hybrid in, and I got my Christmas tree that's behind me, threw it right in the back, had my kid with me in the second row, and just loving life in a hybrid minivan.
Yeah, and it's all hybrid. So
yeah,
that's
it was sweet, man. You got USB ports everywhere. Now, granted, I know it was like mid 40s or something like that. They're not cheap.
No,
but you get what you pay for with minivans. Don't just go right for that SUV.
Yeah.
It's the world's largest Prius. You gotta love it.
I averaged
a good one.
I averaged over 30 miles per gallon in that. And I wasn't really trying that hard at all. Highway, city, you name it. It was over like 250 miles. It was 32 miles per gallon, I believe.
Yeah, well, I'm very impressed with what Toyota's has done with both that and they brought the Venza name back, and I'm driving that right now, and they're all hybrid. And you're thinking, I long ago thought that would become the common powertrain. It's taken longer than I expected, but I'm glad it's here.
Was it all-wheel drive, Greg, or was it just the front-wheel drive one?
I believe we just had front-wheel drive because I noticed a little more wheel spin taking off at the track.
Kyle, you're the guy that's at the track as much as Greg is. Are you noticing any different in the way all these hybrids hook up? I mean, are they really getting that advantage on initial takeoff that is, the manufacturers tell us about?
I mean, maybe a little. I don't think it's terribly noticeable. I don't think it's anything to like boast about, saying that it's really going to give you a huge jump off the line. But it was a really cold day at the track, so the surface was really, really chilly. And like Greg said, there was a decent amount of wheel spin coming off the line, but that was that was just going full throttle, you know, with a little power braking. So
yeah, not all hybrids are created equal. Some
Yeah.
are just made. I would argue the Sienna's made just for ultimate fuel economy. Some have the 48-volt systems to add some electric boost while you wait for turbos to spin up. I think those have a definite performance advantage. I don't see how the Toyota system would, but yeah, not all hybrids are created equal.
Yeah, particularly some of the Europeans that like Mercedes and all. Well, thank you, everybody, for our terrific podcast. And before we go, I want to thank our audio engineer, Jim Bigwood, Greg, of course, for producing today, Bob Mixter, who developed the whole concept of doing our podcast. Thanks to Brian, Greg, and Kyle. And thanks to all of you out there. From all of us at MotorWeek, we hope you have a wonderful holiday season. And in the midst of the pandemic, please play it safe. We want to make sure you're around in 2021 to watch MotorWeek and take it in anywhere you want to take it in. Please don't forget over the holidays to, if you're wondering where the show is, go to our MotorWeek.org website. You can pull down from the top and find out the stations that are carrying you. We, of course, are on the Motor Trend Cable Network. Our YouTube channel will continue to be posting new programs, youtube.com/MotorWeek. Wherever you are, if you're really interested in finding MotorWeek, you certainly can. So for all of us at MotorWeek, thanks very much and have a great holiday season.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.